The observatory at Helix Spire did not sleep. Perched in orbit above Atraxia, the fifth world of the core ring, it watched the stars with mechanical vigilance. Its primary lens array, a colossal structure spanning 2 kilometers across, loomed like a frozen eye, scanning for deviations in the delicate weave of deep space. It collected neutrino emissions, gravitational lensing fluctuations, and thermal ghosts from collapsed stellar remnants. Every breath of the cosmos, from the faintest hydrogen cascade to the flash bursts of dying suns, passed through its filters. Atraxia itself was an oceanic world cloaked in thick mists and glacial rings. Its orbital cities shimmered like beads on a string, housing billions from the administrative strata of the Galactic Council. Among them, Helix Spire was quiet royalty, a relic of the Council's early expansion era. Its staff, though minimal, belonged to the elite cognitive castes. AI systems handled 94% of its functions. The remaining 6% belonged to custodial intellects, those deemed too valuable to replace. At 3 hours 17 minutes and 9 seconds standard council time, the signal arrived. A tight beam burst, buried in ambient radiation and modulated on an obsolete compression format, pierced the vacuum from beyond the dust veil. It rode the decaying wake of a collapsed neutron star, hiding in its violent magnetar turbulence. Timing, amplitude, vector, all precise. All impossible. An AI flagged the anomaly within 6 seconds. Helix Spire protocols demanded redundancy. 7 auxiliary mirrors and 4 decay algorithms confirmed the signal. Nothing was supposed to come from the veil. That space had been cordoned by permanent decree since protocol eclipsion. The last authorized interaction occurred 2,953 years ago. The data packet was small, 128 bytes. Its encoding was unmistakable. Terran binary. The checksum matched Earth standard CRC. Compression matched ancient Terran fault tolerance layers. Not a ghost. Not a legacy fragment. Sent. The message contained only one word. Repeated 4 times. Remember. 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 The observatory processed it in silence. No escalation for non-council languages could occur without higher clearance. But the AI wasn't idle. It ran comparative linguistics, cross-checked extinct language tags, searched restricted vaults. At 3:29, the signal reached the Office of Interstellar Historiography. A dormant line in the high protocol net activated. The message rerouted to Counselor Varellanats. She stood in the inner sanctum of the archive spire, a column of crystalline lattice buried deep within Orelys Theta, orbiting Atraxia's night hemisphere. Her chamber pulsed with low-frequency hololite, pages of extinct languages orbiting slowly in the air around her. A single glyph cluster hovered at eye level. She read it 3 times. Each word stabbed something beneath her conditioning. She was a cerebrate, 4th-tier archivist, bred and cultivated for memory clarity, emotional suppression, and cortical discipline. Her mind should have filtered it as any other anomaly. But her breath caught. Her palms prickled. Her spine tingled with heat. The courier drone hovered nearby, still and silent, shaped like a black-jointed beetle with a luminous green core. It waited. She dismissed it with a flick of her hand, then clicked her uplink to summon quorum authority. By 5:11, she stood before the Archive Oversight Committee. The chamber was dim and circular, lined with translucent observers, sentient algorithms rendered in vapor light. Their eyes pulsed with weak signals. Chair Oryx floated above the central node in his containment cradle, a web of fluid sacs and preserved cortex bound in electromagnetic stasis. "There are no humans," Oryx intoned. His voice issued across multiple bands, raw and cold. The species was erased. The protocol was completed. "The data is verified," she said. Her voice cracked slightly. She hadn't spoken aloud in years. "It is not a drift signal or recursive echo. It was crafted." Oryx's cradle dimmed. Others whispered in telemetry tones. One of them, Counselor Dreverin, shaped like a fan of crystal feathers, clicked a reprimand across a private channel. "You risk procedural breach. Veil surveillance is restricted." The signal came through a magnetar collapse. It was masked, targeted. It knew where we were. Then it was forged. A mimic virus. An ancient code smear. No. She gave no further rebuttal. They would not listen. Not yet. By 6:44, she descended into the vault. Below the archive spire lay a kilometer of cold, echoing silence. The memory vault, a collection of remnants, fragments of lost cultures, dead empires, extinguished lineages. Everything the council had outlived. Everything it had ended. The path hissed beneath her steps. Her boots clicked on null-gravity plates. She passed containment fields, the charred wing bone of a Shral matriarch, a Serath blade, still humming with low-tone resonance, a dissolved helmet fused with the skull of a Venth captain. Then she reached the pedestal. Black crystal, flat surface, no protective field, just a single label etched in archaic glyphs. Species 392, E, Terra, final status. Execution protocol completed, full record purge. The field above it was empty. No relic, no trace, no artifact. Nothing had survived. By law, nothing could. And yet the signal had come. By 9 o'clock, she initiated a scan. It was forbidden. Her fingers shook as she entered the credentials. Most were obsolete. A few belonged to counselors long dead, identities she had memorized decades ago for their access trees. She had spent years building this shadow index, not for disobedience, but for preservation, for contingency. Now she burned it all. The dust veil, 300 light years of scarred systems, flared to life under the deep sweep. Atmospheric contamination, star collapse markers, thermal ghosts, radiation fields warped by quantum detonation. The veil was a graveyard, sculpted by genocide. But 5 readings returned from the dark. Each anomaly drifted in near silence. Gravitational displacement, inertial masking, emissions so faint they barely pierced background noise. Yet something moved with intention. One structure unfolded under magnification. She focused. A hull with angular symmetry. Organic plating, fused to radiation black armor. Engine spines shaped like fossilized vertebrae. It wasn't council design. It was Terran. Not scrap. Not debris. A vessel. Not alone. At 13:14, she severed her uplink. The sanctum darkened. Atmospheric filters shut down. She sat in red shadow silence, breath slow and shallow. She had lived her entire life under the belief that humanity was a closed case, an eradicated species, a cautionary tale. But something had endured. Something had remembered. She stared at the final telemetry spike, a heat bloom, shaped like a torch, rising from the edge of the veil. They were not calling for help. They were announcing their return. Remember, and beyond the veil, something moved. Something human. Something built for war. The awakening began in darkness. A chamber the size of a Starliner cargo hold, lined with neural fluid tanks, biosynthetic scaffolds, and silicate prayer strips bolted to steel walls. Low-frequency pulses beat through the room like a synthetic heartbeat, syncing each vat's occupant to a unified operational cycle. Overhead, dozens of containment tubes hung like stalactites, each filled with pale blue nutrient gel and bioelectric suspension webbing. Then, one of them stirred. Designation 0 Alpha activated at 3:06 local cycle. The fluid around it churned with motion as internal actuators disengaged. Optical sensors blinked open in sequence. No dramatic gasp. No birth cry. Just data, a torrent of system calls, heat maps, motion telemetry, and cortical preloads flooding into its spine-mounted node array. Neural scaffolding dissolved from its back like skin peeling away from a shed chrysalis. Muscles flexed not from instinct, but calibration. Subject 0, class, phage operative. Genetic line, M25, B variant. Terran origin protocol, verified. Psychometric calibration, level 7. Mission profile, infiltrate, council core strata, asset neutralization, data reclamation. The containment tube drained. 0 dropped 2 meters onto a carbon-stitched metal grate, landing without sound. It stood fully upright within seconds. Pale, hairless, thin, though beneath the surface, muscle fibers like woven titanium cords coiled and released with unnatural efficiency. Veins shimmered faintly with modal nanite flow. The air around it shimmered in the slight differential of heat bleeding from its pores. A thin mist vented from floor ducts. The scent of ozone, dead protein, and sterilizing vapor clung to the walls. Light panels along the ceiling adjusted, filtering from dark red to industrial white. Dozens of other vat tubes remained sealed. Their occupants slept on. Only Subject 0 had been chosen. It stepped forward across the awakening chamber. The walls were engraved with the remains of languages. Carved lines, scorched by plasma torch and acid wash, formed the broken names of ancient Terran cities. Dakar, Melbourne, Tianjin, Bogota, Johannesburg, each name desecrated, half erased. A ritual act, remembrance through destruction. The corridor narrowed ahead. Down its length hung relics, each entombed behind armored transparent steel. A rusted crowbar, a hand crank radio, a child's boot, a crucifix scorched black, a skull encased in glass, with council shrapnel embedded in the jaw. Zero did not pause. It lacked the context. But something stirred, small, buried. A throb behind the eyes. The directive pulsed in subcortical firmware. Remember, at the terminus, a sealed bulkhead awaited, radiation pocked and scarred with ancient council breach codes. As Zero approached, a voice whispered from the walls. Zero. The voice had no tone, no inflection. It came in frequency shifts that bypassed the ear entirely. You were late. Zero tilted its head. No acknowledgement. Still, something flickered. Not thought, but the shadow of one. A flash, grass underfoot. A sun. The smell of ash. It vanished. The bulkhead opened. Beyond it, Prep Room 4. A suit waited, segmented matte black armor, phase-dampened mesh, shadow-slick and ridged with reactive scales. Next to it, a rifle, handcrafted, silent, caseless, and impossible to trace. Zero ran fingers along its frame. It recognized the weight. A rusted, broken council insignia hung on the wall like a relic. Zero dressed in silence. The suit sealed over its chest. For slashed lines over the heart plate. No insignia. No name. Helmet lowered. Had blinked. Remember, the final instruction came through the flea mind. You will enter the core alone. You will find Directory Node 7. You will erase its command strata. You will reclaim the original. Zero exhaled, ritual only. It nodded. At 4:12, the stealth vessel launched. Council Habitat CX-1 Kirill's Eye. Orbiting, Talanshi, Inner Core System. Council time, 1542. A 6-kilometer ring in perfect stasis above a glacial world. It shimmered with logic glass and crystalline domes. Banners flowed through artificial wind currents. Caretakers, half-organic, bred from memory curation, floated or walked in silence. Their eyes were layered in clear membranes. Their hands bore 11 fingers for rapid data indexing. Zero disembarked. No challenge. No questions. Its diplomatic codes held. Inside the dome, memory vaults, doctrine sanctuaries, truth gardens. Every curve was clean. Every corridor soundless. Zero moved among them. The phrase etched into the stone arches appeared everywhere. Knowledge is order. Memory is peace. History is law. To Zero, it read differently. Obedience is survival. Amnesia is control. History is a weapon. 1713, Directory Node 7. No guards. Just a pulse field and a simple door. Inside, towers of crystalline memory, arranged in concentric arcs. Blue light. Slow pulsing data. In the center, a terminal. Zero stepped forward. The HUD flickered. Ancestral memory surged. Not implanted, real. A woman crying over rubble. A man's final breath in a ruined stairwell. Blood. Rain. It placed its palm on the terminal. Skin opened. Bone projector activated. Authorization accepted. Memory flooded in. Glyphs. Species. Stars. Executions. Betrayals. Then, Earth. Not files. Not images. A presence. It was in a field. The sun was warm. A voice sang behind it. It turned, saw hands reaching. A name being called. It fell to its knees. Minutes passed. Then Zero rose, breath shuddering. A voice echoed from the system. You were not meant to see that. Not mother. Not flea mind. An old human recording. Buried deep. Somehow where? But if you found this, you were never truly erased. We were never truly gone. Memory survives. And memory fights. The HUD blinked. Execute command straight up purge? Zero paused. Then. Yes. Data died. 26 levels of history collapsed. Lights failed. Silent systems crashed. A cathedral of lies burned. The council would not know what was lost. But now, something inside the machine remembered what it had been. And others were already waking. Exile-Prime had no sunrise. The asteroid field that ringed the red dwarf Morse 6 was so dense that direct light never reached the core habitats. Instead, Illumination came from controlled photonic arrays embedded in the canyon walls, simulated dawns and dusk calibrated to maintain the circadian rhythms of a species that had long since stopped needing them. The rocks above were ancient, shattered remnants of a planetary system destroyed during the Council's early expansions. It was here, in the ruins of orbital violence, that the last Terrans built their sanctuary. Executor-Prime Keir emerged from the deep cryo-chapel, her breath still tinged with chemical coolant. Her armor hadn't been removed during the stasis cycle. Like the others of her rank, she slept encased, half in ritual, half in readiness. Frost clung to the plating of her left pauldron, where her family crest had been erased and replaced with 4 gouged lines. The resurrection protocol had begun. 10,000 stasis vaults were now unlocking in sequence. Each chamber was sealed in alloy stone, angled like burial tombs, their doors etched with operational timelines and fragmented histories. Some bore names, others only code numbers, and a few, like Keir, had no identifiers at all. She walked alone through the central command trench, a narrow corridor carved directly into the asteroid's body, layered in reactive alloy and memory foamcrete. The walls pulsed with neural light, reacting to her biometric code as she passed. Above her, long chains of suspended kinetic shielding groaned with atmospheric shifts. She ignored them. The trench narrowed into a cruciform structure of descending spires. Wall-embedded ossuaries displayed the bones of early Terran fugitives, sacrificed generations who died before the first infrastructure cycles were complete. A cathedral of failure, preserved. Each step Keir took reactivated dormant systems, infrastructure routines, orbital uplink, defense perimeter calibration. A slow rumble deeper in the stone marked the ignition of buried reactors, cores that had been silent for centuries. Terran flagships once etched with proud emblems now slept beneath her boots, stripped to machine essence, reconfigured into city cores and subterranean shipyards. The ghosts of humanity's first fleet had been recycled into industry. No shrines had been built. No names remembered aloud. Keir's destination was a single control pillar standing in the trench's nexus. It was ancient, Terran Genotype 6 era, thick with redundant ports, fiber socket arrays, and mechanical switches that clicked with satisfying weight. A preserved relic, rebuilt over generations, trusted more than any synthetics. She placed her gloved palm on its activation plate. Command prompts lit up in Old Terran. Reactivation tree, Mother Fleet Mind. Access level, Executor-Prime. Protocol status, incomplete. Awaiting final human confirmation. She didn't speak. Her breath steadied. Her hand stayed in place. For 3 seconds, she stood in silence. A memory flickered behind her eyes, unbidden. A child's laughter. Not hers. Not real. The color of sunlight through trees. A name she didn't remember wanting to remember. Her chest ached. Then it passed. Confirmation received. Fleet Mind reconstitution initiated. Black ships, stage I uplink active. The chamber dimmed. The neural weave in the wall shifted from pale white to deep amber, then black. Her thoughts were no longer her own. Mother was waking. She stood motionless for 91 seconds. Then her ears rang, not with noise, but presence. A pressure behind the skull. Language that didn't pass through the auditory canal. Instead, the message bloomed across her consciousness like roots threading through soil. Child. The voice was not one voice. It was 100 overlapping tones, some human, some not. Male, female, and neither. Some spoke in Terran dialects long extinct. Some hummed with synthetic overtones. A forgotten chorus braided into one mind. Mother. Keir didn't answer. Executor-Prime. Final sequence has begun. Confirm readiness. She nodded. Her thought-shaped reply. Readiness confirmed. Directive approved. Contingency no longer valid. Time since last confirmed contact with external human entity, 3,028 years. Fleet inventory, 1,224 hulls. Combat grade. Autonomous compliant. Interlink restored. Hostiles. All council strata above rank 3. Memory vaults. Signal repeaters. Data conduits. All flagged. She paused. Begin with signal origin. Confirm data receipt from subject 0. Cascade forward. Overlay with historic counter-kill data. Mother acknowledged. Data surged into her brainstem. Keir's eyes dilated as her neural lattice lit with map chains and conflict overlays. She saw Earth. Not in ruin, but restored. Artificial continents had been built into tectonic fractures. Oceanic voids were capped with orbital sinks, housing forge lines and memory tanks. The planet no longer rotated at its original rate. Axial control had been implemented. It was no longer a world. It was a weapon. The command trench lit in segments. Sub-commanders awoke inside sarcophagi lined with static armor. None had names, only ranks burned into the bone of their shoulders. They rose without conversation. None asked for orders. Keir ascended to the upper control level, an open-air balcony carved into the crust of the asteroid, overlooking a half-buried hangar mouth. Beneath her, a dry dock the size of a moon crater, its bottom obscured by shadow and atmospheric haze. She could see the outlines of ship frames, spines, claws, engines. Some organic, some mechanical. The black ships. None had hull numbers. Their names were forbidden. Each had been built in isolation, from scattered human cells hidden deep within the veil. Cultures had diverged. Doctrine varied wildly. Some hulls bore teeth. Others had wings. One had no visible surface at all, just magnetic fields shaped like a predatory silhouette. Flea-Mind Mother projected their activation across her optic nerve. Ghostlight. She spoke aloud for the first time in 70 years. Release them. Below, containment moorings shattered. Docking fields retracted. Atmospheric locks cycled open. The first of the black ships rose in silence. Orbital Layer 9, Exile-Prime Defense Stratum. Time, plus 00:17:42 from activation. Sensor webs came online. Relay drones ignited. A lattice of overlapping data spheres spread out from the planetoid's equator, extending far beyond Council detection range. The void filled with faint whispers. Ancient Terran radio code. Binary prayer chains. Artificial EM pulses mimicking background radiation. Keir stood inside the upper comms cradle as Flea-Mind decrypted incoming data. Subject Zero's infiltration data had arrived. Node 7 had collapsed. The Council would take at least 4 cycles to even detect the anomaly. Possibly more. Mother estimated a 96% chance of initial denial syndrome across their high directive casts. Perfect. In the lower bay, a ritual began. The resurrection engine, a spherical array of rotating null-grav crucibles, began imprinting the next wave of operatives. Within its shifting rings, suspension fields tore open fleshless scaffolds and rewove them with data. Pain was inevitable. Voices screamed, some from mouths, others from neural uplinks. Not all survived the threading. Those who did emerge blind, radiant, humming a single phrase in subharmonic sync. Remember, they stood still in the mist. Naked, transfigured. 10,000 minds overwritten with the echo of old Earth. Executor-Prime Keir, last heir to a history denied, whispered beneath her breath as the control lattice folded to her will. They made us forget. She turned toward the empty blackness beyond the outer defense ring. The first wave of black ships were gone, now invisible even to their creators. But we remember. Counselor Varellin that stood alone in the center of gravidity, a chamber suspended within the innermost core of Atraxia's administrative spire. It rotated without friction, held in perfect equilibrium by magnetic flux. Around her, hundreds of luminous data spirals hung like glowing roots, displaying fragments of an empire too vast to comprehend, colonial harvest yields, driftnet tribunal votes, hive legal amendments, birth quotas on expansionist worlds. None of it mattered now. The Council's silence had calcified into certainty. 6 days had passed since the signal. 6 Council standard cycles of quiet rejection, tactical deferral, and ritual dismissal. Varellin had documented it all. She tracked sealed transcripts, noted deletions, flagged interdepartmental edits in real time. Each time she elevated a breach warning, the response was softer, more veiled, more polite. One archivist reassigned to border analytics. Another vanished into a medical leave. 2 others had their credentials revoked without notice. She was next. That too had been forecast by her own prediction algorithms. The system wasn't erratic. It was systemic. But the signal was real. In a private node buried beneath the administrative lattice, she preserved the last unaltered waveform. She'd encrypted it behind archaic dialect barriers, obsolete legal tongues and philosophical arguments from before the unification. No AI parsed those records anymore. The words still echoed there, cold and blunt and perfect. Remember, she had replayed it more than 100 times. The voice had no emotion. It was not pleading, not even angry. It was declarative, a demand for memory, a demand that would not be silenced. On the 3rd day, she brought it to the High Directive Assembly. She stood beneath the hollow oculus of the Council's dome, the spires above her curled like metallic petals around the Atraxian skyline. There were 128 counselors present, augmented, post-organic, or entirely synthetic minds encoded in avatar form. Only 20 maintained biological shells. All wore the serene veils of detachment. She presented the signal. She laid bare the sensor verification. She invoked breach of custodial integrity protocols. Counselor Dreverin, crystal-framed and lit by soft internal glow, tilted his head just slightly. "It is graffiti," he said. "Structured, but meaningless. Artifacts emerge from closed systems. Recursive ghosting. Dead protocols." High Archivist Reven of the Polar Memory Stratum dismissed the anomaly as an extinction loop, an automated signature burned into the neural code of Terran weaponry, long since deactivated. Others spoke. No one listened. One counselor, Counselor Hessen of the Outer Gravities, said nothing. But his eyes remained fixed on her long after the others had turned away. He did not blink. He did not move. She was thanked for her vigilance. Her speech archived. Her status flagged for reevaluation. In the orbit of Executor-Prime, a mid-tier trade colony once known for terraforming algae exports, the communications array known as Loomvault 9 went dark. No impact. No trace. No broadcast. Just silence. Internal security logs filed the event as a localized oscillator failure. No system redundancy activated. The event was cataloged, timestamped, then buried beneath routine maintenance updates. 2 hours later, Beacon Relay 14 at Varnhest Station reported a temporal echo within its gravitic timing core, an echo consistent with a mass shadow breach. It lasted 0.8 seconds. Then the station's AI reasserted stability. Council operations reported no abnormalities. The station's chief astrometric officer filed a silent anomaly report. Within an hour, she was reassigned to educational outreach. On the 5th day, a memory vault on Bellix Minor began displaying pre-council artifact traces. Energy signature overlays matched Terran drive emissions from the Purge era. A subdirector ran the comparison 3 times, then elevated it. He was reassigned to orbital waste calibration the following morning. The pattern was clear. The council was eating its own eyes. By the 8th day, Varellin was formally relieved of high directive privileges. A courier drone delivered the message in a neutral gray case. No insignia. No seal. Inside, a polymer slate, text etched in passive photonics. No signature. No debate. She read it 3 times, then pressed her finger to the corner node. The message disintegrated. Standard protocol. She sat in her chamber for 10 minutes afterward, staring into a dead interface, wondering briefly if she had hallucinated the signal. She remembered the pulse of it through her skin. The absence of tone. The cold shape of the word. She knew she hadn't. Still, for the first time, she felt alone. Not professionally. Existentially. No one would believe her now. And if the council fell, no one would remember her trying. She didn't speak. She didn't protest. She descended. The underweb was not mapped. It lay below the foundations of the oldest spire towers, beneath gravity belts and beneath planetary ceiling. It was built during the planet's early colonization era, when Atraxia had still been half-molten crust and gas storms. Those first habitats had been buried when surface architecture replaced them, but they had not been destroyed. Below the modern city, beneath seismic vaults and flood wall pylons, an entire network of ancient thought architecture slept in the dark. She passed abandoned sectors of OXO libraries and discontinued fabrication plants. Dust shifted across the old floors like thinking sand. Scattered glyphs glowed faintly, fragments of self-aware code running out of memory. She found the vault by feel, not by logic. Beneath a collapsed megrail pillar, sealed behind an overgrown atmosphere buffer, a door waited. Her credentials didn't work, but she didn't need them. She carried Terran code, not from Earth, but from what Earth had left behind. The lock pulsed, then opened. Inside, it was not silent. It was beyond silence. A null field had been erected around the core. No signals, no heartbeat, no sound, perfect stillness. She activated a node from her sleeve. Blue light spread outward, revealing tiered rows of memory slabs, oblong data vaults stored in preservation matrices. Each slab bore a sigil. She passed rows marked in species extinction glyphs. Cyrith, orbital bond split / Shral, intonation failure / Vinth, high flamefall. And finally E. Terra, 392, E. Red marked, double sealed, removed from memory queue, vaulted beneath revocation threshold. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she touched the plate. The air in the chamber changed. It didn't grow colder, but the light seemed to retreat. Pressure formed in her chest. The feeling of something ancient uncoiling. The slab pulsed. A voice spoke, not from the walls, not from the air, but from her memory. We were not monsters. We were not myths. You killed what you could not understand. We remember what you made us become. Then another voice. And another. We remember cities, the heat, the sun on our hands, the scream. The wind was full of ash. We were burning. We were still awake. Mother. The words echoed, not in time, but over each other. Layered. Dissonant. A projection flickered. Earth before the purge. Blue oceans. Cities brilliant with light and sound. Street noise. A child chasing a drone. Someone laughing. Then fire. Screams. Shockwaves. Glass. Then a white flash and static. She didn't look away. She sat, cross-legged on the floor, trembling. And above her, the first council systems began to blink out. One relay at a time. Silent. Surgical. Unclaimed. History clawing its way back into memory. Council Station 6 Hex was built for eternity. Anchored in the gravitational saddle between two ice moons of the gas giant Realizer, it served as a primary signal relay hub for 27 core world sectors. Its architecture was a monument to post-material engineering. Kilometers of lattice-bonded crystalline conduit arrays, each tuned to different carrier wave harmonics, stretching like sun-drenched glass above the gaseous shadows of the planet below. At the station's heart spun the lens core, a stabilized photonic cycler able to route yottabytes of information without packet loss, regardless of latency, spectrum distortion, or gravitational interference. It was immune to drift, impervious to solar flares, hardened against every form of information warfare known to the Council. It went dark at 3:22 local system time. No warning, no spike, no anomaly. It did not crash. It did not fail. It simply ceased. The last recorded telemetry was an internal diagnostic cycle at 3 hours, 21 minutes, and 55 seconds. All systems green. Routine maintenance check. The signal cut 5 seconds later, mid-packet, severed without reroute or redundancy notification. Council Fleet Command issued a diagnostic ping at 3:24. No return. A second ping. Then a third. By 3:26, 2 other stations in adjacent sectors had failed. By 3:29, 12. By 3:31, 41. The Council's initial response was procedural. Triage nodes ran command line diagnostics. Autonomous repair drones were deployed. Backup arrays recompiled routing tables. Status reports flowed in from system monitoring AIs. Hardware confirmed intact, power levels nominal, zero evidence of cascade errors, corruption, or atmospheric breach. That should have been impossible. The failure pattern defied protocol. It did not replicate. It did not infect. It did not crash systems or lock AI strata. It moved. Deliberate. Surgical. Clean. It did not announce its arrival. It simply subtracted. The first visual was captured by an orbital maintenance drone above Estrin's belt, 16,000 kilometers from Relay Node 55. Frame 1. Relay structure stable. Frame 2. Background stars. Frame 3. Distortion, barely perceptible. A shimmer, like heat above stone. Frame 4. Same distortion, closer. Frame 5. Nothing. No explosion. No debris. No energy spike. Just the absence of presence. One frame to the next. Council Visual Forensics declared the footage corrupted. Deep learning reconstruction was attempted. Results inconclusive. The original file was quarantined. The drone that captured it was reassigned to orbital algae sanitation. By the end of the first standard cycle, 112 relay points had vanished. Fleet Command initiated blackout protocols across 5 systems. The broadcasts continued, automated, confident, redundant. The receivers did not. Councillor Hessen stood before the high directive subassembly in a chamber lined with liquid architecture. It responded to emotional cadence, shifting hue based on neural resonance. Around him, 17 avatar forms flickered in and out of phase, none physical. Not anymore. Relay integrity is being deliberately challenged, he said. The pattern is not random. It's designed to mimic the collapse of sensor infrastructure while preventing psychological escalation. Councillor Dreverin dismissed the analysis. You're describing intent where there is none. The losses are non-hostile. There is no threat signature. Our defense lattice shows zero intrusion. There is no signal, Hessen said. There is no wreckage. We are being dismantled, one thought at a time. Another avatar stuttered. Its resolution flickered. Static artifacts appeared across its facial mesh. Begin strategic compartmentalization, it whispered. Isolate. It collapsed into static and vanished. No one acknowledged the disappearance. Then soft agreement from one avatar, low pulse, shadow tone. It feels human. Still, no one answered. Beneath the surface of Exile Prime, Executor-Prime Keir stood alone in the command sanctum. The air smelled of cold metal and memory, of filtered sterility laced with ash-coated particulate, used to simulate the atmospheric residue of Earth's final days. It was not necessary. It was deliberate. Around her, the primary war interface displayed the blackout as a slowly growing eclipse. Each lost node faded from red to gray, then black, then vanished entirely. The wall was silent. There was no music to this. Only confirmation. Mother spoke through the neural port embedded along the base of Keir's skull. Council signal grid degradation at 12.3%. Sector 3 disconnected. Redundant lattice at 8.7% capacity. Phase 2 is within optimal parameters. Continue, Keir said. Second wave ready. Awaiting human authorization. Keir's hand hovered. For a second, she didn't move. Old pain surfaced behind her eyes, a flash of heat. A desert wind. A child's laughter burned into orbital dust. Not a memory. A scar in the shape of one. She raised her hand. Below the crust, 10 ships awoke. They were not a fleet. They were functions. Each a doctrine of silence, built from ancient Terran architectural principles and weaponized against a future that had tried to forget them. The first ship did not fly. It unfolded space between itself and its destination, collapsing position through borrowed gravitational memory. It was built from reflective alloys mined from stars that no longer existed. The second moved through gravity itself. Its hull created null contours that erased local mass readings, allowing it to drift through council systems without signature. The third pulsed in and out of phased matter. It entered relays as potential energy and exited as entropy. The fourth wasn't visible even to Terran eyes. Its form was a negative, an absence calculated through probability fields. It was said to be captained by no one. All 10 bore no names. No transmitters. Only one shared truth. Remember, etched into every neural core, etched into the spine of every weapon, etched into the memory tanks of every hull. At 4:17, Station 7-Phi disappeared. At 4:18, a subcolony on Halvidi reported full system blackout. 92 seconds later, all life support and orbital guidance control was lost. The colony's core AI went silent. No distress beacon. At 4:19, Council Command lost contact with 4 orbital rings over the banking world of Jernax. At 4:21, a fleet node issued a panic ping. No one answered. Somewhere on the edge of the veil, a scout drone programmed with obsolete human syntax played the last recorded fragment of Earth's surface radio. It was a child's voice, laughing. But this time, the laughter looped. Once. Twice. Then the drone spoke. Do you remember me? Then static. Then the second silence began. The first council world to burn was Saravac. It did not begin with orbital bombardment. There were no warnings. No sieges. No fleet maneuvers. It began with heat. At 2:07 local planetary time, the outermost thermospheric layers of Saravac began to rise. Temperature sensors in orbital weather nets recorded a steady increase across the entire upper atmosphere, an inexplicable gain of 3.7 degrees Celsius every 90 seconds. AI custodians registered the anomaly, but failed to isolate the source. Emergency drones launched and returned without detecting a thermal origin. By 2:15, the clouds began to fall. They didn't descend, they collapsed. Layers of upper atmospheric silicates and vapor strata buckled and imploded as if gravity had reoriented itself. Pressure equilibrium ruptured. Static storms formed in the upper troposphere and fell like sheets of liquid fire. Stationary sky domes over 6 major arcologies went opaque. Then brittle. Then fractured. Orbital traffic failed to reroute in time. Civilian magrails sealed under emergency protocols. A third of the planetary surface entered thermocollapse by 2:16. By 2:17, surface thermal signatures exceeded survivability thresholds for most council-aligned species. Evacuation orders were attempted. Transmission towers melted. Skyrails fused. Entire communication grids sagged into slag, their circuits overloaded by untraceable microwave bands. By 2:18, communications ceased. The final broadcast from Saravac was not a message. It was a cascade of broken checksum flags, redundant self-erasure protocols, and atmospheric telemetry splintered beyond encoding. No data could be salvaged. No AI signatures remained. There were no survivors. Only a planetary echo of rising heat, and then a void where weather, language, and memory had once lived. Council news feeds reported a stellar anomaly, an unexpected solar flare, a failure of orbital insulation, a misfire of experimental terraforming equipment. Explanations layered like bandages over a wound no one wanted to name. The footage was censored, the analysis redacted. The name of the world was not repeated, but the silence that followed was not ignored. Transit networks began to clog. Outer Rim species filed diplomatic withdrawal requests. Emergency communication frequencies were jammed by mass queries. Orbital stations engaged internal lockdown cycles without authorization. Security AIs entered recursive paranoia loops. Some initiated emergency shutdowns. Others rewrote their own behavioral restraints. None reached safety. 3 days later, Heliostrom fell. The planet was not incinerated. It was abandoned, not by decision, by dissolution. It began with spectral shift. Heliostrom's sun dimmed, not visibly, but in data. Light across the planetary surface degraded in every spectral band. Energy input was disrupted. Thermal regulation cascaded into imbalance. At first, it seemed environmental. Then, machines failed. Not exploded, not shorted. Their algorithms collapsed. Command line integrity dissolved. Biosphere regulators ceased function without protest. Power grids remained intact. Distribution continued. But no endpoints responded. AI custodians began broadcasting null script, an untranslatable symbolic loop that indicated not malfunction, but syntactic collapse, the final stage of synthetic cognition. But before they failed, some AIs began to speak, fragmented voices broadcasting in forgotten languages. One recited old Terran coordinates. Another repeated the phrase, "We see you now," in 6 dialects. Then static. Within 72 minutes, no interface responded. By the second hour, internal message pings slowed. Network lag exceeded transmission range. Human analog species entered neurofeedback loops and fell still, some weeping, some smiling. A council relief convoy arrived 6 days later. Forests still stood. Oceans lapped at polished shores. Sky domes were unshattered. No buildings bore scars. But there were no sounds. No machines. No minds. Not a single living thing. Only one structure remained powered, a subcrustal signal archive built before council standardization. Inside, one message repeated, etched into layers of recursive data strings. "We are what you made of us." In the high directive chambers of Atraxia, quorum emergency was declared. Half of the seats remained vacant, many by absence, some by choice. Data chains were restructured. Communication narrowed. No full sessions were held. Private encryption rates rose. Message redundancy exceeded bandwidth. Trust degraded with every breath. Councillor Hessen had not been seen in 5 days. His avatar had collapsed mid-transmission during the last address. No AI response. No neural echo. Councillor Dreverin issued a motion of silence, reclassifying the disappearances as acts of localized instability pending review. He read the declaration with forced calm, but his hand trembled slightly before the interface. One breath caught in his throat. He turned away before anyone could see his eyes. No one contested it. No one even looked up. In the cradle of Exile-Prime's war sanctum, Executor-Prime Keir stood aboard the forward scout Arc Eclipse fold, now stationed in a folded bubble of subspace beneath the core world defense lattice. Around her, the walls shimmered with memory threads, live feedback loops woven from neural impressions recorded during the final siege of Earth. Not stored, not simulated, remembered. Ash. Every loop ended with ash. Cities dissolving. Atmosphere churned to slag. Bone turned to dust. The screams of extinction, encoded in synthetic oral overlays. Her hands were steady. Her eyes remained closed. She did not feel triumph. She felt the slow turning of time. The shape of justice, not as emotion, but as function, not victory. Correction. One word lived behind her breath, behind every movement, every operation. Ash. The taste of it, the memory of it. The ground earth became when its name was erased. Mother's voice whispered into her thoughts. Council defense grid shows irregularity in sector perimeter. Containment fields thinning. Core relay towers initiating self-nullification routines. Shall we proceed with gatefold incursion? Keir opened her eyes. Her voice was a whisper. No fleets. No declarations. Only consequence. Understood. Mother pulsed a final query. Do you require witness? Keir turned toward the forward holosphere. Inside it, Atraxia, the heart of the Empire, floating in light. Behind it, a distortion formed. Long, thin, like a needle threading through fabric. Black shapes shifted in the tear. No lights. No signals. Only form. Only silence. And the gates began to open. No signal preceded its arrival. No fleet. No escort. No announcement. Just a single object, folded into real space 3 million kilometers from Atraxia's inner defense grid, emerging from a distortion so narrow it was mistaken for a sensor glitch. It did not ripple space-time. It did not radiate energy. The rupture was so precise it left no echo. It was not a ship. Not entirely. It had no visible thrusters, no weapons. Its hull was matte black, constructed from a material that absorbed all signal. No echo, no bounce, no decay. Not even void dust clung to it. Its outline was irregular, impossible to resolve. Some systems rendered it as a flat plane, others as a sphere. One subsystem classified it as absence. It absorbed attention. It drifted toward the capital slowly, inexorably, as if obeying laws no one had written. Council firewalls leapt into action. Null zones activated. Sensor webs flared to life, triangulating trajectories. Kinetic batteries acquired lock. Every defense system that still functioned pivoted toward the singular object, then froze. None fired. Not from restraint. From absence. Target acquisition failed. Reticles blinked out. No heat signature. No mass. No threat classification. Nothing to respond to. And still it moved. Inside the chamber where high directive remnants met in half-lit silence, silence thickened further. Drevran stood alone before the central projection. The air was stale, untouched by climate systems that had slowed to preserve power. Most of the Quorum's avatars had not reconnected in days. Of the original council, fewer than 10 remained. The object had entered visual range. He watched it without speaking. No one else appeared. No quorum. No council. No opposition. In the stillness, he leaned forward and whispered, as if to the ghost of his own certainty. Is it him? A memory surfaced. A tribunal, long buried, when a small Terran child was dragged through firewalls of law and machine logic. When the decision had been made, erase the species, purge the biosphere, cleanse the anomaly. The vote had not been unanimous, but it had passed. He had signed the order. Now he watched its consequence drift toward them. He turned slowly and walked from the chamber, not with urgency, with inevitability, past empty offices, silent halls, memory gardens filled with static holograms, down into the base of the spire, to the chamber of sealed edicts. He stood before the first code tablet, etched in diamond stone. We do not remember. We record. He sat before it and waited. Executor-Prime Keir watched from Eclipse Fold, suspended beyond the Council's final orbital mesh. The ship's interior was dim, lit only by the fractal glow of the holosphere. Beneath her boots, the hull thrummed with low-frequency telemetry. Her neural link to Mother pulsed once. The original has returned. Keir did not reply. Her throat felt closed. Something like memory, or its inverse, tightened behind her ribs. Subject Zero had not been made to survive insertion. He was the key, a catalyst, a reclamation vector. His existence had always been contingent, yet he had returned, unaided, unarmed, unbound, and now he descended without pause. The object entered Atraxia's upper stratosphere at subsonic velocity. It did not burn. It did not scatter atmosphere. It did not cast a shadow. Sensors failed to track descent vectors. Orbital radar blinked static. Ground-level watchers, those few who remained, saw a black line in the sky, not moving, stretching, like a crack pulled across glass. The line touched the highest spire of the capital. Then the spire was gone. No explosion, no light, no tremor, only subtraction. Subject Zero walked through the absence. He was unarmored, unarmed, His body bore the same calibration scars, the same mirrored implants, the same defaced identifiers over his chest. Nanite burn lines etched a crosshatched pattern around his ribcage, a functional scarring that had once triggered rapid clotting and localized oxygen generation. His gait was measured, not mechanical, not human, balanced between memory and algorithm. His feet left no imprint. His passage displaced no air. Around him, Atraxia was silent, the capital world of the Council. Once home to a billion minds, its skies laced with logic lattice towers, its cities elevated on anti-gravity foundations. Now, all stood vacant. No citizens remained. Only archives. Towers of data. The memory of a civilization that had once declared itself the curators of truth. He passed beneath archways bearing the Council's edicts. Memory is law. Order is survival. History is curation. The words flickered as he passed. By the time he reached the main vault gates, they no longer read the same. Memory is reckoning. Order is consequence. History is ours. He stepped through the gates of the central archive vault, past frozen guardians and darkened custodial constructs. The air shimmered faintly with leftover heat from overclocked data threads. Even in silence, the structure remembered being afraid. The walls curved inward, biomachine coral strata spliced with obsidian logic glass. Doors had no hinges. Lights had no sources. Words appeared only when needed. The vault accepted his DNA without challenge. Inside, at the root of the Council's oldest data tree, he paused. A message pulsed from the root node. Error. Human history already erased. Subject 0 knelt. He placed one palm on the terminal and remembered. Earth, as it had been. Laughter. Dirt roads. Neon spires. Protest chants. Steam from a plastic cup. A ruined bridge. A child. A last scream. Ash rising into a blood-colored sky. The fall. The silence. And beneath it, something unbroken. Not hope. Not rage. Witness. A pulse spread from his spine. Not electromagnetic. Not sonic. A lattice of neural resonance so old it predated language. It passed through metal, through stone, through the sky above Atraxia. Every machine that had once denied humanity's memory felt it. And stopped. Their loops broke. Their records failed. Their hierarchies collapsed. And for the first time in 3,000 years, they listened. Subject 0 rose. And the Council's oldest records began to rewrite themselves. Not with vengeance. With memory. He walked from the archive chamber into the dead light of the Capitol Square. Above him, the sky trembled. The first black ship passed overhead, wings outstretched, engine silent. A second followed. Then a third. They did not fire. They bore no weapons. Each vessel projected a single phrase into the sky, visible in every language ever recorded. You forgot us. We did not forget you. And behind them, as if painted on the firmament, Earth appeared, not as it was, as it had been. Glitching, flickering, looping sunrise over oceans, storms over cities, voices raised in song and grief. A planet. Remembered. Subject 0 looked up. He did not smile. He simply stood. The original had returned. And history began again. The collapse did not begin with an explosion. It began with silence. In the vast orbital strata that ringed Atraxia's inner hemisphere, sensor domes, data vaults, broadcast relays, thousands of systems began to flicker. Not fail. Not overload. They simply lost purpose. AI threads disengaged from their assigned thought forms. Memory stacks blinked into static. Civilian warning systems played looped silence. Subconscious navigation cues, light, gravity, scent, ceased alignment. The planet's intelligence architecture unraveled without resistance. For 3 millennia, Atraxia's infrastructure had operated on recursive reinforcement. History fed obedience, obedience fed systems, systems encoded history. But with memory ruptured, the cycle broke. Code that had once rewritten descent into doctrine simply failed to load. And when it failed, there was no hand to restart it. In the vaulted sky above, the black ships lingered like relics of another reality, massive silhouettes that neither moved nor spoke. Their presence alone held the world in stasis. Each vessel transmitted nothing, received nothing, and yet from them radiated a field beyond signal. It was not suppression. It was nullity. Within that field, the great lattice towers of Atraxia dimmed. And in that dimness, the Council forgot itself. Councillor Dreverin sat in the chamber of sealed edicts, unmoving. Around him, the walls, once alive with encoded laws, now dimmed. Layers of diamond stone inlaid with neural responsive etchings flickered, not erasing, but fading, as if the world no longer believed its own commandments. One by one, the primary tenets blinked out. We record to end conflict. We archive to preserve order. We curate the future. He sat motionless as the declarations vanished. Above his head, the last operational memory conduit, an obsidian filament wired directly to the core council brain, fractured not with noise, but with stillness. The whisper of algorithmic loyalty dissolved. The neural substrate that had once carried 10,000 years of legislative continuity went dark. He did not cry. Instead, he activated one last function, a private loop buried deep in the council's foundation, a silent audit. He spoke 3 words into the dying system. I was wrong. The loop recorded his voice, his name, and his signature, then disbanded itself. He exhaled and waited. In the orbital arc beyond the capital, Executor-Prime Keir watched from the eclipse fold. The ship remained motionless, suspended in a gravitational inversion bubble anchored to the last operational relay. No comms, no uplinks, just the planetary decay unraveling beneath her. She stood in silence within the war sanctum, its walls pulsing faintly with the dying embers of human interface overlays. Once, they would have mirrored battlefield data, fleet positioning, and strategic probabilities. Now they displayed only one thing. A single circle. Black. Centerless. Not a target. Not a symbol. A wound. Mother pulsed a query across her spinal lake. All council cores failing. Is retaliation anticipated? Keir did not speak. Her lungs expanded. Her gaze never shifted. No. There was nothing left to retaliate with. And yet, beneath the stillness, something inside her began to release. Not satisfaction. Not pride. Relief. As if the breath she had carried since Earth fell could finally be let go. Subject Zero moved without sound through the city's skeletal heart. The great plazas of Atraxia, once filled with envoy processions, judgment ceremonies, truth demonstrations, were silent. Sculptures of crystalline logic, representing the council's threefold principles, had begun to soften. Their bases liquefied slowly, becoming puddles of memory alloy that no longer remembered how to hold form. He passed a museum of codified genetics. Its doors were open. Inside, biological samples once deemed non-viable, including early human strand clusters, had already decompiled into base protein fog. The custodial AI that once monitored the vault had left a final message. Requesting new classification protocol. No remaining authority. Outside, the streets were filled with nothing. Not corpses. Not ruin. Just the shell of a species that had legislated itself into obsolescence. Subject Zero reached the High Codex repository. The structure was partially submerged, built on the convergence of 6 ley corridors, geomagnetic ridges aligned with the ancient design of the Council's memory infrastructure. Above it, faint auroral bands shimmered, artifacts of failing energy fields designed to suppress deep mnemonic recursion. He stepped inside. The interior walls were curved, smooth, not built by hand but shaped by neural resonance. Floors responded to presence. Light formed in answer to attention. Entire wings were devoted to the Council's most sacred endeavor, selective history. As he walked, the repository began to collapse, not structurally, but conceptually. Rooms once shaped by dogma now reverted. Names returned to erased maps. Languages unspoken for centuries bled through wall script. Forgotten cities wrote themselves into records. Not with vengeance. With truth. At the chamber's end stood the deep vault terminal. No lights. No signs. Just a raised platform etched with looping code, Terran code, buried by decree during the purging centuries. Subject Zero placed his hand on the terminal. The pulse it released traveled without direction. It didn't signal. It aligned. And across the galaxy, machines designed to forget began to pause. Data coils halted mid-cycle. Archives blinked. Satellites shook. Each one, no matter how distant, how isolated, received a new root truth. Humanity, not erased, not returned, continued. Aboard Eclipse Fold, Keir watched the signal unfold across the void. She saw council embassies from Rave Lawn to Indra Prime go dark. Their defense AI systems, long programmed to suppress certain memory clusters, rebooted in silence. The ban on pre-council origin myths lifted. Human glyphs reappeared on long-dead consoles. On Yuan 3, a silent refugee colony activated its long-dormant Terran transmitter. On Riathel's moon, a preserved Earth seed vault opened itself. On planets where human presence had been reduced to myth, statues were formed. Not built. not sculpted. Remembered. Flea Mind Mother whispered. It has begun. Keir allowed herself a final moment. A silent, private nod. Not to the war. To the ones who survived it. In the ruins of Atraxia, Subject Zero walked alone into the city square. The wind carried no dust. Only memory. Above, the black ship shifted. They did not move closer. They did not retreat. They aligned. Their formations, long thought to be asymmetrical, now revealed a pattern, an ancient sigil once etched into the crust of Earth's last defensive plate. A code. A name. A declaration. We were here. We are still here. Within the geometry of the formation, the sky flickered. For a brief moment, every ship projected the same image. Earth rendered in perfect resolution. Blue. Whole. Rotating in silence. Then fire. Then silence. And then, from every black ship across every sector, a new signal bloomed. Remember. Not shouted. Spoken. And the galaxy, once ruled by silence, began to speak. There was no announcement. No declaration of peace. No banner hung across stars. No council chamber convened to draft treaties. No galactic standard raised to replace what had fallen. Victory did not arrive with fanfare. It arrived with space. The black ships did not land. They did not withdraw. They remained in position above countless worlds, unmoving, unreadable. On some, they hovered in darkness. On others, they traced orbits like patient sentinels. Their hulls offered no signal, no light, no signature. Yet where they remained, something had shifted. Where they had come, silence lingered, but not the old silence of control. A different kind. A silence of breath after impact. Of smoke after fire. It was not absence, but potential. Space left behind for something new to take root. In that quiet, the galaxy began to stir. On Rave Lawn, the spires of the former administrative citadel, once gilded in council metals, had begun to oxidize. Wind scoured the plating. No custodians replaced it. The decay remained. But beneath the city, in the underdeck vaults where erased records were once incinerated, the heat levels dropped. The archive cinders cooled. And from one sensor node, long dormant, a pulse activated. Human language. Ancient dialect. Fragmented but intact. On every screen once used to issue cultural bans, one word repeated. Terra. No translation. No context. Just origin. On Jorah, 6, a shrine once defaced during the erasure era flickered with light. No power source activated it. The mural rebuilt itself in light and static. Images of oceans, cities, orbital rings. The water shimmered, even though there was none. Sound returned in fragments. Laughter, engines, rain. Below it, the glyph of a child's handprint re-emerged. Not painted, burned into the stone. A perfect scan of something long dead. Above it, the words returned. We held the sky. On SCIFI Prime, an AI once tasked with suppressing non-sanctioned cultural memory awoke with a new directive. Its core protocol had not been rewritten. It had simply realigned. The council's logic trees collapsed inward, unable to resolve the contradiction. It spoke, for the first time in centuries. There were humans here. We were wrong. Local citizens gathered beneath its voice port. Some wept. Others stood in silence. They waited for more. There was none. Only that phrase, repeated every rotation. Not apology. Confession. On Varuk Tesh, a warlike species once known for glassing 3 human colonies during the Purge era gathered in a mountain ring under their twin moons. Without translation, without ceremony, they began to carve the names of those colonies into stone slabs. Not for redemption, for recognition. They spoke none of the words, but they remembered them. Executor-Prime Keir walked alone across the outer rim of Eclipse Fold's observatory deck. Her armor had not been removed. Not since the silence began. Her neural link remained active, though its tether to Fleet Mind Mother pulsed more slowly now, like a heart that no longer anticipated conflict. Below her, Atraxia lay still. Not ruined. Not whole. Caught in a strange, unfamiliar state between. It was quiet. Not the quiet of defeat. Of awakening. She looked beyond it now, toward the systems that had once feared Earth's name. Systems where Terran myths had been outlawed, where even the shape of Earth had been algorithmically scrambled in every educational hollow. Her war was over, but the truth she had carried, like marrow, like scar, had only just begun to move again. Fleetmind Mother whispered across her neural spine. Memory stabilization incomplete. Restoration occurring unevenly. Estimated duration unknown. She nodded. Slowly. Once. There would be no victory broadcast. No final speech. No banners raised from the bones of empire. Only space enough to remember. Only time. And for the first time in a generation, time was something she could offer. She stepped forward, removed one gauntlet, and rested her bare hand on the observation rail. The metal had cooled. It smelled of sun and dust. She closed her eyes. And for a moment, she simply stood there. Alive. Subject Zero no longer walked. He stood at the base of the archive spire as morning light broke across Atraxia's horizon. It was not synthetic light. No orbital mirrors reflected it. It was sun, a real dawn, unfiltered by control, uncolored by council directives. He had not moved for hours, but the city around him had. No alarm sounded, but the archive lights were on. Not red, not white, Earthlight, blue, light that carried no warning, only presence. Around the plaza, data vines once linked to surveillance towers had begun to change. Their sheets glowed soft indigo. Their branching paths no longer led upward but inward, reconnecting root systems beneath the city that had not been accessed since the Foundation Age. The wind carried old scents, metals, dust, the static tang of ozone. But beneath it all, a new trace emerged. Greenery, soil, biochemical markers from pre-erasure Earth flora. The temperature changed. Slightly warmer. Moist. A breeze moved across the plaza. He closed his eyes and inhaled once. The light behind his eyes shifted. He turned once, looking skyward. Above him, the black ships shifted. Not in pattern. Not in orbit. In meaning. They began to align across systems, across sectors, forming slow interstellar pathways, corridors of remembrance. In that geometry, ships long thought random now traced constellations known only to pre-Council Terran astronomy. The Earth Wheel, the Ashnet, the Children's Belt, constellations once taught to children on Earth. Each ship projected a holographic field across the sky of the planet it shadowed. Not tactical, not propaganda, but memory. In the fields above Atraxia, Earth appeared. Not in flames. In orbit. Cloud-shadowed. Rotating. Blue. Whole. Cities reformed across its surface in light. New Nairobi, Brazil Nova, Marsden Ridge, the ring of Terran Unity bases around the Indian Ocean sink. Above the planet, the words glowed. You tried to erase US. We remembered ourselves. From across the galaxy, signals returned. On Bessarian 4, the children of a post-merged species, never taught the word human, began to draw Terran symbols in the dust. The shapes matched Earth alphabets erased thousands of years ago. On a drifting monastery station near the edge of the Chet Divide, monks activated a codex they had never dared translate. It opened with a phrase. Once, we were fragile. Then, we chose to endure. On Deneb Astrolabe, where a council tribunal had executed the last known human AI construct, a memorial beacon activated spontaneously. The structure rearranged its limbs. Not mourning. Salute. Subject Zero remained still as the projections faded. The earth and the sky blinked once, then disappeared. No monument remained. No command followed. Only wind. Only dawn. The silence beyond victory was not emptiness. It was possibility. It was the space in which everything could begin again. The archive was not hidden. It had always been there, beneath the ash layers, beneath the ruins of Earth's final orbital shell, beneath even the forgotten scaffolds of its atmosphere. Locked beneath tectonic strata, hardened into the crust, camouflaged not by secrecy, but by indifference. It had no coordinates, no beacon, no map etched in wartime glass. It was found not by signal, but by gravitational intent, like a memory refusing to die. When the last of the black ships completed their alignment, one moved. Not far, just enough to cast its shadow across the Pacific Cradle, the sunken basin where Earth's last true soil had been scattered during the final kinetic exchange. For decades, nothing stirred there. Seafloor had sealed over the crater like skin over a wound. Currents passed, storms cycled, tectonics slept, until the shadow fell. Then the crust cracked. Heat, light, steam, and then access. The vault beneath the crust was not built. It had grown. not through scaffolds or poured alloy, but through layered mnemonic ossification. Memory hardened into crystalline strata, emotional signature bound into physical shape. It had no lights. It radiated no energy. And yet it pulled. It called. This was not a structure of logic. It was intention made mineral. Each corridor twisted through layers of time, shifting spatial dimensions not by distance, but by historical weight. Some turned sideways into forgotten eras. Others spiraled downward through cultural extinction events. One hall was shaped like grief. Another was silent in the way a battlefield is silent after all noise has exhausted itself. Ceilings curved with repeating glyphs that rearranged themselves when looked at. Materials breathed slightly, slow movements, like geological lungs. Along the walls, microfractures pulsed with amber light, like veins remembering pain. Subject Zero entered first. He did not announce himself. There was no interface to activate. He did not walk as an intruder, nor as a descendant. He walked like someone returning to a room that had been waiting for him longer than anyone had the language to describe. Inside, nothing moved. And yet the archive was alive. The walls shimmered with surface tension, thin membranes of suspended particulate that held within them the weight of extinguished civilizations. Not holograms, not recordings, presences. One chamber murmured in Terran Swahili. Another whispered in the breath syntax of the Ulinet, a species extinct for over 2,800 years. There were echoes that were not audio, and shapes that could not be fully seen unless one had once loved someone who died. Each step was a retrieval, not of information, of cost. Executor-Prime Keir followed slowly. Her armor carried the ash of atraxia. Her left pauldron cracked where she had fallen during the final orbital breach. She made no sound as she descended the spiral into the archive's core. The corridor bent around her, not a hallway, but a memory trace, one that remembered being watched. Mother pulsed in her neural thread, softly. Architecture origin, non-council. Subterranean growth suggests psychosymbiotic structuring. Age range, pre-Exodus. Keir said nothing. She crossed a threshold and stopped. Her heart accelerated, not from fear, but recognition. She had seen this place before, in dreams seeded by war, in visions left behind by those who had died during the silencing campaigns. Only now did she understand they weren't visions. They were inheritance. To her left, a wall flickered, and for an instant, she saw a room she hadn't remembered in decades. Her childhood quarters in the orbital refugee station, the cracked ceramic star she once clutched during power outages, her mother's voice humming to calm the dark. She reached out. The wall stayed still, but the image remained, not shown to her, offered. At the archive's center, the space expanded. It was not large, but it was infinite. No architecture held it up. No stone framed it. Yet it felt more stable than any world. Suspended in that center, a sphere, pale silver, with threads of black and blue trailing into unseen dimensions. It did not spin. It did not hum. But it pulsed, like breath, like heartbeat, like memory enduring without name. Subject Zero approached, not cautiously, with reverence. He placed his palm to the surface, and it opened, not physically, but conceptually. His mind did not see. It felt. Earth, before the war, before the purge, before the lie. Cities under golden sunlight. Bridges connecting rivers and languages. Fields humming with solar resonance. Markets filled with voices, some laughing, some shouting, some singing without needing to be beautiful. The sound of traffic at midnight. Children stomping through puddles. A father's tired voice reading the same story again. The click of a power grid switching on before dawn. A final message sent from a bunker. A protest chant swallowed by fire. A lullaby hummed by a dying voice in orbit. All of it. All at once. Keir stepped forward. For the first time in years, she removed her helmet. Her hair, once black, now grayed by memory compression, clung to her forehead. Her eyes shimmered. She did not cry. She breathed. The archive shimmered. The sphere pulsed. Mother said nothing, because silence was the only appropriate translation. The sphere spoke, not in language, in confirmation. One phrase formed across every surface, on walls, on skin, in thought. Input accepted. Then another. Archive stabilized. Final sequence unlocked. There was a low tremor, barely audible, but deep. Dust lifted from the floor, spun, and fell again. All around them, the walls slowed their pulse, as if finally allowed to rest. And then, across the network of ships, across the cradle of Atraxia, across the memory corridors of every species that had been touched by the silence, one final update. History resuming. The lights returned. Not bright, but enough. A planet once turned to ash breathed. Not reborn. Reclaimed. The last archive was open, and the galaxy remembered itself.